Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, we're going to continue looking at the Hake brush, looking at different ones, different techniques, and kind of just looking at it from a beginner aspect. So previously, I think I just talked about the Hake brushes I had, and then I did a painting using this absurdly large 4-inch wide one from Hobby Lobby. And we just focused on it. We saw what we could do, what we were unable to do with that. This one is a more reasonable size, 1.5, and we're going to play around with that one today. This does not have the price on it, but I think this was about half the price of this one, and they were already half off. That being said, they're not my go-to Hake brushes. The Ranson Hake brush is my go-to, and you can see as they get used over time. This is the exact same model from the exact same company. This one has been used quite a bit. This one has not been used yet. So there are differences and things that just come naturally. This guy, we're going to explore, like I said, with this one in that regard. We're also probably going to see at the end of the video if I want to keep it the way it is or sacrifice it with experiments with solvents, etc. See if there's ways we can age it. The previous previous video, a gentleman who goes by Mega had said that the solvents will make it brittle, will just really kill those hairs. And that might be a risk I'm willing to take just so we can see what can happen. Because a lot of people will say, how do you get those textures? And so far it's just been time. And just to show, this was with the 4-inch Hake only, with a card scratching as well. And my main takeaway was that I had to paint very, very fast and loose in the style of Stephen Cronin. So we'll see if that same thing happens here. I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. The first thing we did with the previous one was see how much hair will come out of it. And I very aggressively went to town like this. I'm going to pause the camera so you don't actually have to watch this stage, but I'll show you how much hair comes off of it. All right, so I spent about a minute very aggressively going at it. And if I pull all this together, see that we have almost a second brush that we can go ahead and use. So a lot has come out of it. I have read about people putting glue in the ferrule with hairs. I think that the shedding is just a sign of most likely quality, where it's probably just lacking some in that regard. But it is a $5 brush that I got for, what, $3. All right. Okay, so that first part is out of the way. And that being said, brushes, you don't have to go super expensive with them. One of the painters that I admire, YouTube painter, Stuart Davies, he paints in oil. He uses the chip brushes that you'll find at a department store. And they are obviously low quality brushes. And he even talks about having to remove those loose hairs from it. That's not justifying spending little money on brushes or spending lots of money on brushes. It's just kind of giving you some perspective. Think about what approach you want to take with it. I personally think the order of importance is paper. Paper is definitely the most important thing to me. And you'll know that I always try to use 100% cotton paper. So I applied a coat of water with this. When I apply my coat, I usually use a large Ranson Hake brush, which is about the same size, maybe a little bit bigger. And with this one, we'll get to painting. Okay, so my plan is to stay within the tonalist realm. We'll see what we can do. The last painting was just Hake and card. This one I may allow the number 1 or the number 4 rigger to be introduced. But the main goal is for us to look at these brushes. So this is my raw sienna. Probably going to take the Stephen Cronin approach as well again. The other one gave very lovely skies, and I think it was just because of the big brush strokes and the lack of fiddling. Let's mix a little bit of ultramarine blue in here. And that's Hammy wanting attention. Though the art room door is open, and he was in here. He came flying in when I walked in. Oh, there you are, Hammy. Yeah, what's up, dude? Yeah. Okay, so that's ultramarine blue. I think I'm going to do a high horizon line. You can see how we have hairs everywhere. Pulling out a little bit of highlights. Leave that here. We'll grab some ultramarine blue and some light red oxide. And we'll start working our way forward in the picture plane. One nice gentleman commented that he really likes the approach of building up and creating the layers of the scene. So that was cool. I'm glad that y'all are enjoying this style. The other way would be a direct painting. You kind of paint each object in a little bit more ultramarine blue. This one's probably going to be loosely influenced by Jasper Francis Cropsey's Hudson River Valley painting. I just splurged and got a new laptop. My PC, my desktop, was giving a lot of trouble. I would try to post on the Patreon, post on YouTube, go through the comments, and it just glitched so much. And I looked up the specs and I asked some people, and they had said that the computer is just kind of at the time where it needed to get a new one. So I got that, and I don't usually play around with backgrounds and images on computers, but my background is a Jasper Francis Cropsey painting. And there'll probably wind up being some Herman Herzog and other things. This is the raw burnt sienna and some burnt umber, just warming things up as we come closer. Let's go for a warmer mix. This one's staying a lot more frazzled and frayed than the other brush, even though it's the exact same brand and material. I think the goal would be to make this one, see how just realistically feasible it is to use this brush as opposed to the Ranson Hake brush. The 4-inch was fun, but I think either using a larger sheet of paper or just using it to wet the paper and create a soft sky would be the use for that one. Oh, and a few other things. Someone had messaged me on Instagram, a very nice lady, had asked if she followed along with one of my paintings, if she would be allowed to sell it, if she would have my permission. And I said, of course. So that being said, you're always welcome to follow along with anything that I paint. and you have my express permission to sign your own name on it, to sell anything you do that you follow on this channel. I want you guys to be successful and have fun and have money for art supplies. I think she was looking at the a swan painting, swans in the dark forest. And she had sent me a picture of it on Instagram, and it was really beautiful. So, adding on to that, you guys are always welcome to message me on social media. You're always welcome to send me what you painted. Tag me in what you paint. I'll check it out. I love seeing that. It just really brightens my day. So I know that I'm nowhere near as good a painter as a lot of people are out there. And for somebody to actually listen and follow along means a lot. I'm taking the card now, just kind of putting in some horizontal scrapes just to get an idea of the layout. I don't remember too much about the Cropsey painting, but I did paint it 2 years ago in oil, and like just a kind of little study session on the 4th of July, actually. Oh, I have it right on the wall, right here. I don't know why I didn't look up. Yeah, like literally. I paused the camera. I'm such a doofus. Here's the little study that I did of it, 16 by 20 in oil. So that's kind of the compositional shape that I'm going for. It shows how much I look at my walls. Yeah, I know, Hammy, I never look at the walls. I'm always painting. So we're grabbing some umber and raw sienna. And we're warming things up. We wind up having this path. And we have the tree groupings with the wet and wet trees. Just getting the idea there. And then when I come back over it, when it dries, I can get a little bit more depth out of that. An issue we had with the larger Hake was the inability to put much pigment down, concentrate the pigment. Let's see, now I'm going to start building some darks up. Ultramarine and Payne's Gray. I'm going to create that ridged edge there. And we have another ridged edge. And we have the base of the trees. A little bit more darker foliage. I think we will be able to put larger quantities just because of how smaller the Hake is. Add some darks in here. We can try to scrape out some tree trunks. I think personally, and this is just my own philosophy, is that looking at the masters of the 1800s has helped me a lot. One thing I used to do a lot of, which I really need to get back to, is doing pen and ink sketches and studies of master paintings. It forces you to experiment tonally because you're doing pen and ink. You're just working with the black. You're having to pay attention to textures if you're cross-hatching and doing different mark making. And it forces you to look at a painting for longer than 10 seconds, or longer than a minute, longer than 15 minutes. And you start realizing elements that just weren't there in the initial look. And that's just my philosophy of it. So I would recommend sketching master painters from the 1800s. Herman Herzog, Jasper Francis Cropsey, I think it's pronounced Burstad, Thomas Cole. There's so many. All right. So right now we're still within just the Hake and the card. Pull out a thicker trunk here. Pull out some more highlights. In the original painting, I believe it's a path, and then there's some water that has washed up. And there's a lot more visual background back here, but we'll see what we want to do. I'm going to pause and dry off. All right, that should be dry enough. It lightened up quite a bit. The hairs that are there, this is number 2-inch of that same brand, but it was used for oil painting, and I would use it to soften skies in the style of Stuart Davies with oils. See if I can just brush some of that hair off there. I have to just take a vacuum to the painting. All right, let's see. I'm going to work my way back to front again. This time we're not going wet and wet, but that softness that we created should kind of tie the whole painting together as we paint over that. This passes around behind it, but it gets dark right there, so we'll have foliage blocking that. I think a little bit of lemon yellow will help. I don't think I'm going to crop the video so you can see the pan. One thing with Hake brushes is the butcher tray. It's very kind of a necessity for me. Joe Menza and Matthew Clemens, who used the Hake brush as well, they had found another palette that has places to put the paint that they can pull out of with the Hake brush. I'll have to ask them. But I really have no need to change my palette, what I'm pulling off of. I think I got these at Michael's. It's an enamel. It's metal. I think Hobby Lobby sells a plastic one. I'm not sure about Blick and Jerry's Artorama. I've mentioned I kind of put out a little bit of a poll of what people wanted to see on the channel for this month. And I think my order is going to wind up being from Jerry's. there's one thing I personally want to explore this month, or next month, just a smaller squirrel mop. But I can't afford, like, squirrel mops are expensive. I'm not complaining, I'm just stating the fact. But you watch some people paint with them and they're just absolutely beautiful. I have a number 6 Paul Rubens, but Amazon doesn't seem to have any smaller ones than that. And Jerry's has some with the Creative Mark brand that are smaller. I was looking at one on Amazon, a set of 3, but my buddy said that they were pretty crummy. You know, that's an interesting thing. I'm going to grab some burnt umber while I mix this. I'm looking for a dark. Obviously, take everything that people say with a grain of salt. I highly respect my buddy that had said that they weren't that good of a brush. I'm not going to name who it is. It's another YouTuber. But, you know, because I don't want to have his name attached to something like that. Not that a lot of people are watching mine. But, you know, that being said, you know, for $30, I respect his opinion instead of me dropping the $30. Payne's Gray. So far we've been all Hake brush. We might be able to stay within that. We get the classic Hake brush grass effect. This is just gingerly touching it. One thing that I need to harp on is that if I need to pull more water, I'm literally just taking the edge and dipping it in like that and putting it on. Because for me, we start putting too much of a pile of paint, and then everything starts getting wet and again, and we start losing texture and definition, which is fine, but I'm looking for texture in these spots. So experiment with different water concentrations, experiment with holding the brush in different fashions. Here I am just gently catching the paper and letting those marks build up. I'd meant to try some Yupo. I was looking at it at Hobby Lobby when I was picking up brushes, but it's just overpriced. And I think Hobby Lobby is overpriced on that that type of paper. I'm using the sharp edge. Let's grab some yellow earth tones, some raw sienna. We could really liven up the path. I used the card to scrape my trees. One thing we haven't done with this, and it's time to get our hands messy. I wet the brush entirely. just for this experiment here, and we'll see how sharp we can get it. In fact, without really much shaping, this one has a much more chiseled point than the other brush. So you can use your fingers much like a hairdresser to bring that point to shape. And we're doing that just so we can start seeing how thin of a line we can get from it. This is how I used to paint my trees. I think I've mentioned that I used the number 4 rigger just because of ease of use, and I like the calligraphy type strokes here with that brush. This will give a great effect if you're going for birch or textured bark surfaces. It's a good change of pace. One thing we always talk about is how a lot of artists feel like we always fall into the same pattern, the same approach. And you could identify different artists by their hand and how they paint it. So even modern painters, even people on Facebook, you could scroll through a page, and I know an Ian Campbell, and I know a Colin Woodward, I know a Joe Menza, I know Lois Davidson, Matthew Clemens, Posey Gaines. All those people, you look through and you start seeing and you recognize it. A Stuart Davies. I want to go into that background with this and see how we can get going. And it would show through, so I'm just darkening those spots. We can grab a little bit of burnt umber, burnt sienna. Then more Payne's Gray for the way closer foreground ridge. There we go. Foliage. Grab light red oxide. You know, sometimes I think something and I don't say it, so if I said it already, I apologize. But earlier I did say you're more than welcome to follow along and to sell anything you do that you followed along with. And I think eventually you'll develop your own style, so you don't have to feel like you're biting somebody else's style. Not that anybody said that they felt like that, it's just kind of throw that out there, that eventually you'll develop your own thing. In fact, in Chinese brush painting and the Oriental arts, the best way to learn was to copy others. When I would watch Henry Lee, Blue Heron Arts, he would sometimes take out a piece of rice paper, unfold it in the video, and he'd say, oh, this was from Master so-and-so. And the master would show him and then give him that to work from. And that's how he learned some of his stuff. still wet back in there, but just trying to create that. There we go. And we would wind up having a little bit of smear down here. I'm gonna try something different. Just use my finger, bring that reflection. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. A lot of the basic watercolors aren't dangerous, especially if you're not like eating them or inhaling them. Good. Let's pause for a moment. We'll do a dry off. I think I'll put out a little bit of fresh from the tube lemon yellow, and we'll stipple it in some foreground. I know I had said my plan is to probably sacrifice this brush to experiments, and that'll still probably be the case. But that being said, if this was the only Hake brush that I had access to, it's usable, it's doable. It's for, if you can find it for $3, I'd say you know, maybe pick it up. I don't want too thick of the lemon yellow. And remember, this is just Hake and card, and a little bit of smudging with the finger. So even at just a cheap Hobby Lobby Hake, you can get a lot out of it. This is 1.5 wide. They had a size smaller, and they have the size 2. I wonder if they have the size 3. I'll grab some more Payne's Gray now and accent the darks. With the 4-inch wide, I did have difficulty building up super dark. I think this one, a little bit more potential for that. Now, I'm by no means saying I'm great or anything like that, but Stuart Davies, who is absolutely great, I had said earlier how he paints with the chip brush, the brush from the department store. You get a lot of texture. Thinking we will grab a little bit of white gouache now. These little pans you can find at Asian markets, and they're great for a paint that doesn't usually go on your palette, for gouache and experiments. The reason I do this is the gouache will contaminate the rest of the palette, where it gets that chalky white mix running all over the place. Let's see. And this is to just push a little bit more forward in a very Bob Rossian type way. gentleman I mentioned earlier, Mega, who comments, he had sent me a picture that he had painted, and he used the whitewash to push his foreground forward, which was very successful. Joe Menza has been doing very interesting things with whitewash. I think Ian Campbell uses it quite a bit. We're moving out of the snowy season now, so we're seeing less of that. All right, let's pause and do a dry off. I'm very pleased with these results. Like I said, if I didn't have access to other Hake brushes, I think that this one would suffice and eventually wear to the point of use for me. A lot of texture. We only use that and the card. Brushing off hairs from the brush. But overall, pretty happy with it. I think the next brush we'll experiment with is essentially a kind of more chip brush, a solvent-proof brush. So it's be harsher hairs, but you can see how frayed it is. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below what you think and what you would like to see. Please like, subscribe, follow if you want to support this channel. Doing that really helps out. I also have a whole bunch of links down below where you could support, whether through joining the Patreon, through membership of the YouTube page, the Buy Me a Cup of Coffee, etc. So thank you, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day.